Welcome, everyone, to an NCAA Selection Week chat. I'm Andy Katz, and I'm pleased to be joined by Chris Reynolds. His day job, he's the Bradley Athletic Director, but for these purposes, this year, he is the chair of the Men's Basketball Selection Committee, and 1992, IU played in the Final Four. It was my first Final Four. Yes, I'm old enough to say that was my first Final Four that I covered. Chris, it's a pretty unique situation. What's it like that you played in the Final Four, and now you are the committee chair, essentially helping put together the bracket for a Final Four this year?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, Andy. And it's humbling, it's surreal. Certainly in 1992, while I was out there on the court, I never would have envisioned being in this role right now today. And so from a perspective of that, it's quite interesting. And so it's an honor to be first of all, on the committee, let alone being chair. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
All right. So this is essentially day one of really the meat of the work. What is the schedule on Wednesday as it sets for the rest of the week?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we'll cast the initial ballots, and that will typically result in approximately 25 teams being voted into the field. And then we'll also, from that, create an under consideration column, and there'll be approximately 40 teams in that column. And so that's pretty much where we get today.
Now, the 25 you just mentioned, is that in addition to the automatic qualifiers that we've already seen over the last few days?
Yes, absolutely.
So the number is starting to grow into that field of 68. The conference tournament started over the weekend. They are beginning across the country in a lot of the power conferences. What does the committee look for in some of these individual matchups, especially teams that obviously are competing for bids in maybe the potential, double-digit seed range?
Well, what we're looking at right now as relates to teams, certainly keeping a close eye on their current resume. Certainly seeding comes into play as it relates to teams and these games that are happening right now. But every game matters. And so from November until now, that evaluation, that resume is building and growing. And so certainly this week we'll spend a considerable amount of time evaluating each team that's going to be considered, and we'll be comparing those teams to each other.
We used to say, physical team sheets. Now it's on a computer screen. And I just want to, sort of reinforce this, but obviously if you can, you're there, I'm not, but conference affiliation on the quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4, where on that screen or sheet does it ever say which league those teams are in?
It doesn't show it at all. And so unless you happen to know, which I'm assuming most do, you wouldn't know the conference that team is a part of. And as it relates to our evaluation, conference affiliation does not matter at all.
See, that was a great answer. I'm not a lawyer. You handled that perfectly. Injuries. If there's an injury late in the season and a player is not able to play in a conference tournament, but they've got a great body of work and you can evaluate that, but how do you handle a team missing a key player this week?
Yeah, so let's say hypothetically, if a player was injured last week and now they're going to their conference tournament games gives the committee an opportunity to watch and evaluate that team without that key player. And so, again, it's a part of the resume, but again, without their key player, that's certainly noted. And so all injuries beginning in November, we keep track of. And certainly this week, we'll certainly be doing that as well. But to answer your question, it just gives us an opportunity to watch that team without that key player and see how that team does.
All right. So on February 18th, for the top 16 reveal, the 4 number 1 seeds were Purdue, Alabama, Houston, and Kansas.
Correct.
So at that point, how many other teams were under consideration for those number 1 seeds?
Well, at that time, Andy, the answer would be 0. Those 4 teams were the 4 teams that we discussed, and there were no other teams that we considered for that number 1 seed line.
A couple weeks later, how many more teams potentially could be in that grouping?
Well, obviously, over the last 3 weeks, there's been a lot of games played, a lot of movement up and down. And so there are a few more teams that we'll certainly be talking about in addition to those 4 teams based upon the results that we've seen.
And the last thing, Chris, there's the top of the bracket and the back end of the bracket. In your experience on the committee and now as the chair, which part you think is a little more difficult to figure out, trying to seed the top or seed those double-digit numbers?
To be really candid, Andy, I think it all is difficult. I mean, it's a lot of time, a lot of conversation. You have 12 different voices at the table. So it's a subjective process and people come with their own thoughts about it. But we have a great deal of conversation and a great deal of debate, but it'd be difficult to say one is easier than the other. I think it's all difficult.
Well, Chris, I know you're going to be watching a lot of basketball and get comfortable there over the next couple of days, and we'll talk to you throughout the course of the week. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Andy. I look forward to it. You take care now.